I think we're being recorded. Again, I'm Janine Solomon. I am the Director of Pro Bono and Learning at Massachusetts Advocates for Children. I'm joined today by my colleague, Ann Guay. Ann Guay is a longtime pro bono attorney with Mass Advocates. And we're also joined on screen today. Anna Krieger is our Executive Director. We're excited again to be here. We appreciate your time. Today's training in total is going to run about an hour. Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Maeve, for helping us to get this up and running. And we may also be joined by Kadeem Apply. He is on our board of directors and he is an associate with the firm. So he hopefully will come in and say hello today. So, okay. Anna, were you going to say something?
Oh,
yeah, please.
Yeah, I would just love to say hi to everyone and thank you all for coming. We just are so excited about, obviously we love having Kadeem on the board. We've roped him to being the clerk of the board and the chair of the development committee. And so it's very, wonderful to build a pro bono connection between Mac and Nutter, and are just so grateful for your time. And this is just a moment when kids need more advocates than ever. So it's just so exciting to think about you joining and being part of our work. So, and I just wanted to thank Anne particularly, who is like the superstar dream pro bono lawyer, as you will hear from her. She's just been so incredibly generous with her time and advocacy and skills, and also is a former board member of MAC. So we're just very grateful. She's a part of the family. So I just wanted to say that, and I apologize. I'm at an event with, you might recognize MCLE behind me. Do you recognize those walls like at Winter Street? I'm at an event for the State House News, trying to get some good connections to increase the profile of Mac. So I will probably bid you farewell in a minute, but I wanted to welcome everyone and say hi and just thank you so much, especially at this moment. We really appreciate the support. So thank you.
And thank you, Anna. We're going to be showing a video in just a few minutes, and you'll.
And I'll be in it. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So,
all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead to the next panel, and I just thank you all so much. So
thanks. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Okay, we've had one other person join, so I am going to hopefully share my screen, and this will work. Okay, so we're going to share here. And all right, is everyone hopefully seeing this? Yes? We back on? Kate? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, terrific. Okay, so we're going to start from the beginning. What we're going to do today, as I said, we're going to provide really just a brief overview. We're going to start with a bit of an introduction to Mass Advocates for Children and our pro bono program. And then we're going to go into an overview, a kind of high overview of special education law and the IEP process. For those of you who may be interested beyond today, after today's workshop is done, what I will do is I'm going to be sending a bunch of materials to Kate and Maeve that they can then hopefully distribute. But many of the things that we talk about today will be attachments that we'll be sending over. And then, of course, Anne is here today. She's going to be providing some insights about cases that she's worked on with MAC over the years. And so hopefully that will help to fill in some of the information that we provide. So I think you were going to say a few words here as well.
Yes, first I want to thank you all for coming today. As someone who spent a great deal of time in private practice, I understand how busy your day is, and the idea of adding more to your plate can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming. But I will say over the years, some of my pro bono work has been my most interesting work and my most informative. And some of the skills I have today as an attorney, I gained doing pro bono work at the firm as a young associate. So it's wonderful to have you here. I wanted to just share briefly, in addition to my work at Mass Advocates, I'm the mother of a 30-year-old son with autism. And as a result, I meet parents in very different stages of their lives with their children. And when people find out you're a pro bono attorney, you get to meet a lot more people. And answer a lot of questions. I just wanted to start with one brief experience I had. A mother had found my name on a flyer somewhere, called my house and said she wanted to talk to me about her son with autism. But then she started by saying, but I need to explain something to you. You live in Bedford, but I live in Lowell. So we have different special education laws, but I'm hoping you could still help me. And my first reaction was to say, oh, no, but we lived in very different communities with different resources. And over time, I started listening more to parents and learning. It helped really affect my work. So her remarks still stay with me so many years later.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we'll get into some of those areas more, and then we'll also end with a Q&A. But if it's possible, and maybe Kate, since we're not seeing the screen, I don't know if there's a better way to be doing this, or we're not able to see the people right now in the room, is that if there's something that we say that somebody maybe needs a quick clarification on, if it's either put into the chat or if somebody just wants to say something to us, please do. And if not, we'll have questions at the end.
That's good.
Okay, so just to get into things a little bit more, this is information about Mac's mission. Oops, it looks like one other person has joined us. This is on our website, but really what we do is we help to remove barriers to educational and life opportunities for children and youth in Massachusetts. And we really work with children who have been historically marginalized in our state. We use a multi-strategic approach to our work. Not only do we do the direct case advocacy, but we also do administrative advocacy by working with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education on, regulations and guidance. And then we also do legislative advocacy. We work on legislation, and overall, what's most really important in our work is working with the families and the community engagement. And all of this is to really ensure that many low-income children, those with disabilities, those who are English learners, Black and brown youth, immigrant children, that they have full access to the services and supports that they need. And oops, now it's not advancing. All right, I don't know why that is, but give me 1 second. I'm going to, I think, stop sharing for a minute. And now we're going to try to go to do this video. Let's see if we can get back to this. Here we are. So I'm not sharing anymore. That's what the problem is, right?
Correct.
So I need to go back to share. So just give me 1 minute. If I go here, I'm going to go to share. There we go. All right. And then we go back to YouTube. I may have to back it up 1 quick second because it depends on where it is. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start. And can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Education is a right, not a privilege.
So my dream job is to become an artist and a singer.
My dream is to publish a book one day.
At Massachusetts Advocates for Children, we use law, policy, and community organizing to achieve equity in education. Our dream is to work with communities to create an educational system where disability, race, language, and immigration status are sources of strength, and every child's dream is within reach. We advocated to pass the first special education law in the country, which was the blueprint for the federal law and changed everything about education in our state. But we are at a pivotal moment for education. The impact of the pandemic and the lost year of learning on youth is not a ripple effect, it's a tidal wave. We are seeing more Black and brown youth with disabilities taught in segregated settings. We are seeing schools fail to support English learners. So we're changing that, just as we have since 1969. We are holding schools accountable when students with disabilities don't get school transportation. We are working to pass new laws so that school interpreters are available for any family who needs them. And we are fighting school discipline practices that criminalize Black and brown children and keep them out of school. And we are doing this work hand in hand with communities so that children and their families can realize their dreams.
Okay. I'm gonna go back here again. Sorry about that. You all were able to see the entire video? Okay, good. We got rid of that technical difficulty. And now we're gonna go back to our presentation, so bear with us. Okay, we're gonna try this again, and hopefully we could now, we'll have a full slide in just a second. Let's see. Yeah, resume slideshow. Okay, great. All right. So thanks for that. So as you just heard from our executive director, I always like to say it's a fun fact to know that actually here in Massachusetts, our state law, which is listed here, the Massachusetts Special Education Law, which is in Chapter 71B of the Mass General Laws, that actually preceded the federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So we gave you just a few of the laws that pertain to special education. We provided the statutory sites and the regulatory sites. So again, you have the IDEA, and by the way, there are a lot of acronyms in this work, so I always do try to speak it through, but in case there is something that we say anywhere along the way, just jot it down and we'll be sure to give you the proper term. But first, there is the IDEA, which is the federal law, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Is another federal law that's applicable to students with disabilities. There is our state law, again, Chapter 71B, and the regulations are at 603 CMR 2800. And then we provided also this two related laws which have to do with student records. The first one is the Federal Act, Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, if any of you have heard of that. And then we have our state school records law. Moving on, one of the kind of cornerstones about special education work, and particularly the work that we do on behalf of parents and students, really is the rights of parents in the special education process, and their work in advocating on behalf of their children and our representation of the parents and children. So one of the main pieces of it are a few different things that we wanted you all to be aware of in this work, that up until a student turns 18, their parents have what's known as educational decision-making authority. So it's actually the parents who are signing off on their child's individual education program, or IEP. When a student does turn 18, actually when it's 17 going into when they're 18, there is a point in time where the school will be addressing educational decision-making authority and whether the student will take that over, whether the parents will have guardianship over the student beyond 18. And then there's ways in which the student can share or delegate that authority. So a lot happens around this time, but always up until the 18th birthday, it's the parents that are the ones that are making the decisions. As we said here, the parents have a right to see their child's school records. They can request that in writing, and the school needs to provide it within 10 days. A big piece too of kind of due process rights is the right to consent. So parents do have a right to consent when the school wants to do an evaluation of the students. A lot of times the parent is requesting the evaluation, and you will see in some of the documents that we provide later, we have a notice that goes out that's standard from the school, as well as a document that goes along for the parent to be able to sign off and give their consent to the various evaluations. When we get into the IEP itself, parents have the right to reject or accept in part their child's IEP, and we'll explain that in a little bit. We're also going to talk a little bit about parents' rights to request independent evaluations if they disagree with the school's evaluations. And really another critical aspect is that the parents are equal members of the team. I think a lot of time in our work, it can be really daunting for our families to go and to be meeting with teams because there are often a lot of members who are at the table. And for some of our families, this last bullet talks about it. Many of our families that we work with at MAC, English is not their primary language. And so there's a lot of challenges, but they are entitled to written communication and documents, and to have interpreters that are able to translate into their primary language.
And I just wanted to add something,
Please.
and something as lawyers, most of us were pretty good in school. That's sort of how we landed at the seats we're in today. School was a positive experience. Many of our families, that wasn't the case. School could have been stressful. School was interrupted. There's a series of situations that arise. So you or I might walk into a room of 9 teachers, which is still intimidating to me to this day. But at least I'm in a setting where I'm comfortable. But for other parents, it's really anxiety producing because school was not successful for them. And so now they're seeing their child. It may be perceived as a problem. It's just something to keep in mind when you walk in those rooms.
Thanks. So we're going to refer to this timeline throughout the presentation, but here it is in full, and then we're going to break it down as we talk about the various concepts. But this really is a timeline that helps to guide the referral process all the way through the IEP. So we kind of broke it down and just as a way to remember it, said remember the 5, 30, and 45-day rule, which is basically once a referral happens, a school is then required within 5 school days to send the parent the consent to evaluate the child. Once that's signed off on and that's returned to the school then has 30 school days in which to do the evaluations. And in total, once the evaluations are done, you're going to go to the team process where for the first time, eligibility will be determined. And then if eligibility is determined that the student does require special education, they will develop an IEP. So in total, that process should take 45 school working days from the initial parent consent. And then, as I said, if there is an IEP that is produced at that meeting, the parent then has 30 days in which to respond to it. We made a note at the bottom left of these slides to just let you all know that in addition to the initial time a student is determined eligible for special education services, every 3 years they go through a reevaluation process to determine their eligibility. But in addition to that, in addition to the every 3 years, actually every year, once the initial IEP is produced, each year thereafter, the team is going to meet to discuss that IEP and to make revisions to the IEP for the following year. So again, step 1 really is the referral. We do give the regulatory site, which is 603 CMR 2804. I often refer to the regs. I mean, constantly I'm looking back at them. So we just wanted to make sure you all had that. But this is how the process starts when the parent makes a referral. Other people can make referrals as well, pediatricians and so forth, early intervention providers. But once that referral is made and the parent consents, then the process starts. Going on to types of evaluations. So schools, the first ones are the required types of assessments. Schools are required to do an educational assessment of the child, as well as to assess the child in all areas of suspected disability. That piece in particular is important because sometimes, for example, we have seen a student who maybe has limited speech or is nonverbal and perhaps needs a communication device in order to be able to communicate. Sometimes that's not even part of the IEP. And so it always kind of signals to us as we're looking through an IEP, and if we see that the description of the child is that the child has very little language and that they maybe would benefit from a communication device, that always kind of signals us to let us know that the school may not have assessed that child in all areas of suspected disability. Some optional assessments that schools can do and oftentimes do are psychological assessments. Many times for children, they may need some related services in the areas of speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy. And then there's various other assessments, such as the assistive technology assessment that I mentioned before. Starting at age 14, there are very specific assessments for looking at the functional and vocational needs of a child. Observations can be included. And then lastly, all assessments need to be in a form and a language that's going to yield accurate finding and results. So I know you wanted to add a little bit here.
I just thought it would be helpful to share a quick story. MAC has a helpline where parents can call in and leave questions and folks will follow up. And a mother called in. She's the mother of a 6-year-old daughter with autism. The parents were divorced and dad was active duty military. MAC was actually able to arrange for an independent evaluation and then a classroom observation by NESCA, which is an educational firm in Newton that does really exemplary work. We presented the independent evaluation and the recommendations during the team meeting and had a really interesting, my first time experience for me as a lawyer. Counsel for the school district noted that it was probably the strongest evaluation they had ever seen and thought the presentation of what was observed in the observation was, they had never seen one done so well, which was lovely for the provider to see. But it also showed that they were seeing that, gosh, there are good ones and not so good ones. Mm-hmm. As a result, though, our mom's concerns were taken very seriously, and the recommendations given by NESCA were given tremendous weight. And as a result, the student received the services that she really needed to make progress. So it was a win-win for all of us.
And this is something that we alluded to before, and it's a lot of what Anne was just talking about, is that sometimes parents don't always agree with the school's evaluation. It may be incomplete. So as part of a parent's right, as we said in some of the beginning slides, they have a right to request a publicly funded evaluation. We give you some of the citations, both the state site and as well as the federal site. And Anne and I were chatting about this before today's presentation. This is a little bit of a complicated area of law where we can provide more information to it, but I think the bottom line in asking for independent evaluations is that certainly parents can get a second bite at the apple. And also there are certain timelines here in terms of if an evaluation was done and this parent objects to it and wants to request an independent evaluation, there is a 16-month time window by which they need to do that by. If they're outside of that window, and that happens a lot of times, families will come and maybe 24 months later say, I disagree. schools usually at that point want to have the opportunity to move up their 3-year evaluations and to do those evaluations again. And then the families can still go ahead and request an independent if they still don't agree. But it's that 16-month time window that's really important, so that when these evaluations are presented to the family, if they're not satisfied and want to make the request, they need to do so within the 16-month time period.
And also, just to point out quickly, independent evaluations for folks generally can be quite expensive. Some parents are fortunate, they have excellent health insurance that will pay a portion of them. I've seen charges of anywhere starting at $5,000. For many of our clients, that is just impossible. So fortunately, there are laws that provide for a publicly funded independent evaluation, but it can be complicated, and we would be able to do a deeper dive in another time.
Yeah, exactly. And there are state rates for these evaluators. So, and we use that quite frequently in our cases. So going back to the chart, just to kind of put some context as to where we are now. So now that the evaluations, the referral has happened, the evaluations are complete, and then we're going to move on to step 2, which is the team meeting. Another point to recognize: on the left of the screen of this particular slide, we make note that before the meeting, the parent can request that the evaluations are provided to them 2 days in advance of the team meeting. You really want to be able to have time to review it, digest it, certainly talk with your client about it and answer any questions they may have, so that, you know, there's no surprises. When you go in, you feel prepared going into the team meeting, but you can request, and the school is required to provide those if requested in advance of the team meeting. And for families that need it translated, it needs to be translated as well. So that's something else we wanted to make you aware of. So moving on to the topic of eligibility, also in the documents that we'll be sharing afterwards, we're going to be sharing with you an eligibility flow chart, because again, once the evaluations are complete, and in particular, as I said, if this is the first time a child is being assessed for special education, once these evaluations are done, your team is going to be answering a set of 3 questions to determine if the child is eligible for special ed. So the first question is, does the student have a disability? If they find that the student does have a disability, and there's various categories of disability that are listed not only in our state regulations, but as well as the federal regulations. Once they get past that initial question, the next question is, if the student, is the student unable to make effective progress in terms of accessing the general education program? That is a really key aspect in terms of special education law. So does the child have a disability? And if so, are they unable to progress effectively in the general ed setting? If they do require special ed, or then the third question, I'm sorry, is, does the student then require special ed? If they're unable to make progress, would they then require special education related services in order to make progress in the general ed program and in terms of accessing the curriculum itself? So these are answered, as I said, as part of a flow chart, and you'll see that flow chart afterwards as something to reference and to be thinking about. But these are 3 things that the team must look at for eligibility. And then if the child is found eligible for special education, then the team will develop the IEP. There are also times that if a team determines the student is not eligible for special education services, again, another document that we provided you was a notice. The school needs to provide written notice to the family for the school's reason for finding of ineligibility, and they need to provide that to the parents within 10 days of the meeting itself. And then lastly here, we also wanted to point out that if an evaluation is inconclusive, there is also a concept in special education practice where you can do what's called an extended evaluation period. What will happen is that it's a 40-day period in which they do additional testing. Sometimes they do that in an alternate placement, or other times they do it within the school, but they need more testing in order to be able to determine the disability. Okay, I think, yeah, I think that's about this on these slides. We wanted to just let you know about two overriding principles in our work in special education law. The first one is FAPE. Children with disabilities in special education are entitled to a free and appropriate public education. So free is exactly what it sounds like in terms of the services that they're receiving. They're not going to be charged for those services. And then appropriate is that it needs to be individualized, unique to the student to meet their needs as determined through the evaluations and their placement. And all of this takes place within public schools, secondary schools, including charter schools and vocational schools. They must provide FAPE to all qualified students, and so that they can benefit from their education. Again, I don't know if anyone has ever heard of either one of these terms, but they're always used together because a child must receive a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. And that's really your placement. Again, some of this will become clearer when you all see the actual IEP itself. But there is, on each IEP, you have the document itself, which really discusses the needs of the students, and we'll get into this in a few slides. And it looks at not only what the disability is, what the eligibility category is, what services and programming that the student need, but in addition to that, they're also going to be looking at where will the child receive those services? Where is the placement? And as we note on the bottom bullet point, again, this is another document that we will share with you, is that placement is on a continuum. All students, and as we note in the bullet above, which is really what the law says about LRE, all students must be educated without being removed from the general education environment when, you know, with the use, they should be in the general ed setting with the use of supplementary aids and services. And if after using supplementary aids and services and they're placed in the least restrictive setting, which would be in the general ed classroom with peers without disabilities, if that can't be achieved satisfactorily, they may need to be moved to a more restrictive setting. And so as we say here, full inclusion is really in the general ed setting. Sometimes students need to be moved to pulled out from the general ed setting, sometimes in what's called partial inclusion. Perhaps they just need a reading program, or they may be pulled out for services for speech and language. There are also students that need more specific programs. Some schools will have programs specifically for students with language-based learning disabilities. And so that in and of itself is a placement where students are placed for the majority of their day. It's a substantially separate placement within the school environment. So it goes along from full inclusion to partial inclusion to substantially separate. And then there are times when students' needs cannot be met within the public schools, and they may need to go outside to a private day placement or to a therapeutic residential program, which is a school where the student actually stays overnight. They're there sometimes for some students up to 365 days a year. And as we say, that's the most restrictive setting. So it's really along a continuum, but the decisions about FAPE and what a child will receive as part of their IEP based on their unique needs and where they will receive those services are the two kind of main pillars as part of special education. What is FAPE and what is the LRE for the student?
And the tuition for these programs is paid by the individual school district with supports from the state as well. So these costs are not borne by the parents.
Correct. We just want to address here, and we mentioned it as part of the laws earlier, that for some students, they may not be eligible for special education or they may not need it, but they may need services under a 504 plan, which is under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, which we covered under the laws. So here the qualifications are just a little bit different than in terms of special ed. A student must be diagnosed, have a diagnosis of suspected disability, either having a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more major life activities, being considered as having a record of such impairment, or being regarded as having a disability. These are all categories of when a student might be determined to have a disability. And then a 504 plan, if they are found to qualify with this disability, a 504 plan would be developed to cover various accommodations for the student. And we give some here, such as some students just need perhaps services related to their healthcare needs. Others may need adjusted class schedules. Some may need actual physical ramps or elevators in order to get into the building. But 504 plans really provide that information for the students.
And something I've noticed in my practice and in my own family's experience, sometimes students are on an IEP, and as they make progress, become older, especially in a public school setting, there's a recommendation that they move off of an IEP onto a 504 plan. And for the right student, that can be a very good change. One of the things you'll often see are extra time for students, and it's worth pointing out, people can take their 504 to college with them. Mm-hmm. And so the needs change of the student, and so therefore what is offered changes.
Right. And that's really a good point. And I should have said that in the beginning. Eligibility for special ed, you could be found eligible starting at age 3, and services can run up to your 22nd birthday. And so a lot of families do have that concept. They wonder if the IEP goes with you to college. And the answer is no, it does not. Once a student, and we don't get into that in great detail here, but we do have other trainings that really go into graduation and what that means for students with disabilities. But once they do accept their diploma, their entitlement to special education ends. They can get 504 accommodations in college. They will have access to accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act, but the IEP is specifically for when they are in the secondary and elementary ages. So again, just to show you the chart that we started off with, again, through the referral process to the team meeting, to determination of eligibility, and then development of the IEP. And as we say, it really needs to be calculated to enable the child to make progress in light of their individual needs. and then the parent will have time to respond once that IEP is developed. We'll get into those slides next. So we're going to talk a little bit about the content. I know we've talked a lot about the IEP. And again, we'll be sharing with you the state, just so you all know, it's at the bottom of this particular slide. Just within the past year or so, the state has actually changed up the form itself of the IEP. The content is still the same, but there were some new things added.
Yeah.
There's really a focus on students and student participation in their IEPs, which we'll talk about a little bit. But much of what you're seeing here on screen is part of the IEP, but they did change up the format. There's new information in there for English language learners that had never previously been in. So there were some really good changes, and this is the first year that they have been using the IEP. I think the year prior, it was slowly starting to be rolled out. So we're still working out some of the kinks. It's going fairly smoothly. So some of the content areas of the IEP, your IEP, one of the first things on it is going to be information about the parent and student concerns. And as well as there's areas in the beginning of the IEP that are going to give the key evaluation results and information about what some of the student strengths are and their areas of challenge. The parent and student vision and the team vision is another important part of the IEP, because that's kind of your look ahead to see what is it that you may want to accomplish as part of this IEP or in the next year or longer for the student. Various other sections which you'll see are there's present levels of performance, both in the general ed setting as well as in other settings. There's areas related to the curriculum and academics that the IEP addresses. You're going to have goals and objectives. So for example, if a student needs to have speech and language, for example, as part of their IEP, in addition to maybe having an English language arts goal and a math goal in general, they may have also a speech and language goal as well. The service delivery grid is a very important part of the IEP. That's where it is laid out, where the services are provided, who provides those services, and what is the time period? How often will those services be provided to the student during the week or during a month? And then there's various sections to the grid. There's a section relating to consultation for teachers and providers, as well as with families. There is a section that relates to what services may take place in the general ed setting, and there is a section that relates to whether or not services may happen in another setting if they're pulled out for some of those services. And then lastly is placement. And I didn't know, did you want to say anything?
I just wanted to share with the development of parent concerns is actually a really nice opportunity as an attorney to, we kind of look at a case and figure out what we think are needed, but it's really important to listen to what the parents' concerns are. What are the parents looking for? And actually, what is going well for the child? There's this tendency to label a child by their disability. And it's important to remind yourself, no, it's this little boy or little girl who has autism or has dyslexia, has another issue. And I find it's a nice way to help prepare parents for the meeting itself. There's nothing worse than walking in and seeing a room of 10 people and then someone asks you, what are you worried about with your child? Ask anyone that. It wouldn't be unusual to fall apart. But if we organize something and write something and share it with the team, have the parent read it, they feel as though they're being listened to, that their needs are being addressed, and quite candidly, the rest of the team tends to sit up and pay attention. You also have a nice written record. and it's nice to refer to it every year. I have to laugh though. I think of my own son. When he was 17, he had an out-of-district placement out of school for children with autism. And because of his age, he got to come to the meeting. My son's pretty involved. They asked him what he thought, and he looked at the director and he said, I can't stay here. I'm too tall for the playground. I'm never going to have a girlfriend. And I almost the director started to cry. I thought he had just waved away all our services, but it was really important to hear that. And actually we made a change. He went to another school. He went to a collaborative, which is a different type of setting. The best part of all, because he had a placement there and our town had already budgeted, his spot went to a military child in Bedford who really needed the services of this school. So it was a win-win across the board, but I still have nightmares about that meeting. So I just wanted to share that.
These are types of services that are available in students' IEPs. As I said, you can have sometimes paraprofessionals that can accompany a student if they are in the general ed setting, for example. Some students might need a paraprofessional that is helping to facilitate and implement their learning, helping, they're going to be, the paraprofessional will be getting instruction from the special ed teacher, and then they're going to be helping the student as they work through whatever worksheets or assignments that they have. The IEP may address, again, a resource room. Does a student need to be pulled out for some sort of specialized services, such as a reading program? IEPs can address any parent training that's maybe necessary. I mentioned earlier these augmentative and alternative types of communications, or what we call AAC devices. Through that, I was able to get an AAC device for one of my clients. And we talked about not only did the team need to be trained, and the person that is in charge of the device itself and programming the device, that person needs to train the school staff, but they also needed to train the parents, because for these AAC devices, the student's communication needs don't stop at the school door. The student needs to have that same form of communication at home, and so you're going to have that device going between school and going home, and the parent also needs training. So that's just one example of where parents can get training and actually be listed in some of the services in their child's IEP. Extended school year, this is a big time of year when students that need to have a, be in school over the summer, which is what's called extended school year programming for students with disabilities, that gets addressed in the IEP. Transportation is addressed. Occupational therapy, as I said, the physical therapy, speech, and if a child requires a behavioral plan, all of these different types of services, as well as whatever services that the student needs, they are going to be covered in the IEP itself. And again, these are part of FAPE. Yeah.
And it's something to keep in mind. And through no fault of their own, teachers try to really emphasize what's positive in these team meetings. You'll go in and it's always the child's best day for the most part. And then the parents, one client I had, as a result of her culture, had incredible respect for teachers. And the idea of disagreeing as a teacher was just abhorrent to her. So we had to kind of have this, realize that it was a discussion and it would be helpful. What really worked well, as Janine mentions the AAC device, Max sometimes is the first person that comes in a classroom and says, you know what, we really need this. In one district we were in, the district came around, they actually realized this would benefit other students and hired a staffer to make this doable. And it was a real benefit for everyone. Another thing is trying to open the parents' ideas up to what's available. Home services can be really helpful in certain settings or after school settings. And what does that look like and what's it going to be? And when you ask the district to do it, the district also pays for it. Mm-hmm. So these are all things where we can kind of brainstorm in a meeting and realize that those needs will change year to year. Mm-hmm. But we can start out intense and make changes as they go along. and parents really benefit, as do the students.
A couple more slides and then hopefully we'll have a few more minutes for questions, but this is a main concept again in special education law, which is the concept of what's called stay put. Really what it's referring to is that if at any point, as I think the next slide is going to address, and we talked about it earlier, once the parent receives the IEP, they're going to look at it and they're going to make a decision about whether they're going to accept it in full, accept it in part, or reject it in full. And so if they disagree with certain parts of the IEP, an easy example, one that I'm dealing with a client right now, the student was receiving speech and language services 2 times a week, and the school said, based on our data and the student's progress, we want to cut back to 1 time a week. The parent felt adamant based on what they were seeing in terms of the progress at home, and they also had their child seen by an outside speech and language provider, that they felt that 2 times 30 or twice a week for 30 minutes each was what their child was required. So based on the earlier IEP, and now the school was presenting that they would like to cut the services, the parents rejected that in part. And while there is this dispute regarding services, sometimes there's a dispute regarding placement, the student will retain those services until it's decided otherwise. Sometimes teams can agree and come to an agreement, which is always the best and most efficient way, but sometimes it needs to be decided by somebody outside, and we'll look at those slides in just a minute, and that might be at the Bureau of Special Education Appeals or through mediation. Here we just wanted to show you the actual response page on the IEP, and again just showing the various boxes of where the parent can either sign off, and if they do reject in part, they can also provide information as to what they're rejecting. And then lastly, as we said, there are times when we're going to agree to disagree. And if that's the case, there are various options for families. The first option is our state problem resolution system. That really is, parents can file a complaint. It's on paper, kind of a paper process that can take up to 60 days. And it's really, they deal a lot with compliance issues. You know, was the IEP being followed? And if not, you know, does the student, are they entitled to, you know, some of those services, as well as is there anything else that the school may need to do in order to be able to compensate? Sometimes families can go to mediation, or other times they may need to have go to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals for due process hearings. And then finally, although unfortunately our Office of Civil Rights here in Boston has pretty much been decimated, unfortunately, with recent developments, but the Office of Civil Rights is also an area in which families can file complaints based on discrimination based on disability. So that's always an option for them as well. I will hit escape. I will stop sharing. I think we made it with a few minutes to spare. So again, we wanted to thank you all for being here. Hopefully, again, we couldn't see you all through the whole presentation. So hopefully a lot of what we said was clear. I think once you see some of these documents, and I think a lot of times with this work, it's once, you know, if you all are game, I should say as part of our pro bono program, we are here for you. What we do is when we get these cases, we vet them, we review the records for merits, and then we, if the attorney, once they've done a conflict check, can take the case, we'll then pass the documents off to you, and we stayed tethered to you. We're here for mentoring. We're here for strategizing. We're here to provide materials. If you need sample documents, we're here at every step along the way, because we want it to be a success for you all, for you to gain from doing this work, and we certainly want it as a success for our clients. I don't know if there are any questions on anything that we covered in the last few minutes. And if not, maybe it was crystal clear.
We're really good at this.
We did have an example, but I don't know if we have enough time. We had a few minutes where we could ask you all a question to see if you all maybe just understanding of some of the materials. But you know, one of the questions that we were going to ask is that we said if the district, if the school had decided not to add services or to take away services that the parent requested, what might a family be able to do in this instance? I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in on that or if it's too late in the presentation. Again, as we were talking about in the last couple of slides, what families can do is they certainly, if they disagree with this, the school for either not increasing services or for decreasing services, they certainly can reject in part, and then they can state the reasons for why they do, and they can assert their rights to stay put upon those last agreed upon services in the IEP until a decision can be made.
And one of the challenges we've seen post-COVID, I don't know, it depends where people live. A lot of districts have openings, particularly in special education. They just don't have enough people, but that doesn't excuse them from providing the services. And at times the schools are a little overwhelmed, but the parents and the advocates and attorneys still need to press and say, listen, because everybody lost during COVID, but students with disabilities lost even more. So we don't really have the luxury of saying to a particular district, hey, we're going to give you a year and hope you go find a speech and language pathologist. Or, you know, okay, there's no behaviors, we'll just let our kid act up for a year. It cannot go on, and it's sort of a delicate dance. You're sensitive to the needs of the schools, but ultimately you represent your client and they have to provide them. And that is a constant issue right now, no matter where you live.
Yeah, absolutely. Bulk of what we see. So thank you all again. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. Kate, I'll be circulating materials to you all. We're certainly happy to entertain questions after the fact. So if you want to either send us a question or email us, I believe in what I'll be sending, I'll have my signature block. So feel free to reach out, and certainly we'd love to hear if any of you are interested. We do have additional trainings and more advanced trainings, and then happy to work with you going forward. And again, we just thank you for considering joining us in pro bono, and thank you for this time today.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be well.
Bye.
Thank you.